Hey everyone, welcome, and for previous followers, welcome back. This is the Basement Binge. I'm your tri-host, Cade Lurcher. This week we watched Mad Max Fury Road.
All right, this is your second tri-host, Kelton.
And I'm your third tri-host, Harrison. And just to give you guys an update of how we're kind of breaking down this film, talking about it, is we're going to start with what we call Pick Your Poison, where we each talk about our feelings about this movie, whether we would choose to never see it again, rent it maybe on like some streaming service or Redbox or something, or even buy it. Followed up immediately by what we call our 2 cents, where we each get exactly 2 minutes just to support the reasons why we would buy it. So I guess I will go first here while Cade's pulling out the timer. So an obvious answer for me, I would buy this movie. And the reason why, one, I already own this movie, so that's an obvious answer. But the second thing is, I just am in love with this movie. I feel like I'm just going to self-proclaim that I'm an expert on this movie because I've watched it easily. This is probably a bad thing to say, but easily over 20 times. I've read everything you can about it. I've watched every behind the scenes thing you can about it. I've read everything the director, George Miller, has to say about it. I've just studied this film. It was introduced to me in one of my film classes, and it's just... every time I watch it, I'm amazed at how good of a movie it is, and it's so enjoyable to watch. The action is phenomenal. The acting with such little dialogue is phenomenal. The storytelling mixed with action is phenomenal. The directing, the cinematography, the use of practical effects, the themes and messages of it, just the lore of the world. Tom Hardy's in it, and it's got clean language, which is great. It's got my favorite phrase that I use all the time, "fang it." There's just so many things about this movie that I just love. And so for that reason, I would obviously buy it and keep coming back to it, particularly the reason that I just think it has powerful messages that we can apply. But it's also such a fun story to watch. And the action is phenomenal. It's just enjoyable to just watch, just turn off your brain and watch. But it's also incredibly enjoyable to talk about and why it has meaning and why we should think about it and what messages it's saying for our world and why it pertains to us. It's a movie that lasts, which is pretty cool. But I still have 15 seconds and I don't know what else to say without getting too deeply into it. I'm just in love with this movie and I could talk about it forever because there's so much that just falls out of this movie every time I watch it. So
Awesome. All right, well, here's my pick, my poison. I'd say I'm kind of on the fence. I want to say I would rent it for multiple reasons, but I would pursue it and watching it multiple times, if that makes sense.
Okay.
Because one, I mean, a lot of movies that I buy is for like me and my wife to watch, and so me buying Mad Max Fury Road, I couldn't really see my wife watching it, so I say I would watch it with someone. I'd always be down to watch it, but I wouldn't buy it. I would rent it. Just for the sake of my wife, if that makes sense. My 2 cents about the movie, when I came into it, I knew it was. I found out it was rated R, but I was curious of how they portrayed it because since you loved it so much, so I trusted your instinct to have how much you love this movie. So I came into it with an open mind and wanted to know, okay, what's the story? Because a lot of radar movies are like extreme, like all about like the just why it's rated R, and they just
not so much the story.
Not so much the story. And so the story is kind of like a lot of empty holes and unanswered questions. But this movie didn't have that. It had the rated R because of just the violence. All the other reasons why you could say something is rated R, they excluded that from this movie, and I really liked that. So for me, I could focus on the story, and I enjoyed the story. It was great. I was incredibly impressed by how they moved the story along with such little dialogue. That was when I was impressed the most, as well as the scenic shots of like this. They pull back and they show this next scene as they go into it, but it just is very kind of a slow motion or just very dramatic scene where it's just like it's just epic, and you kind of want to just pause the movie and just look at it because it's so incredible. But those were my first thoughts just right off the top of my head.
All right, 2 minutes are up. All right, this is Kelton here. For my pick, my poison, I think I'm still on the fence about this one. I really don't know what to say. I'm stuck kind of between renting it and buying it. And the reason why is because I was actually pretty confused about this movie to start off. I haven't... I haven't...
Definitely.
Where is this?
I was sick today, so I'm still kind of like out of it. But I had no idea there were like other movies before this. And so definitely, if you haven't kind of read up on this before, you might be a little confused on like who is who and like why these certain people are in charge and what the heck is going on. But Harrison explained a little bit to us, and going through it, it's a little different. Like the other two hosts have mentioned, there's not a lot of dialogue, so it's a little different. But you kind of have to go in with this kind of with different expectations. I love the action in this movie. Definitely kind of a lot of stuff you haven't really seen before, or at least I haven't in movies. I think one of the great things with this movie that kind of drew my attention was the lighting. I noticed there are kind of two different effects with like the daytime and the nighttime, and I thought it was really cool. I love the nighttime. I don't know why, just the lighting.
When it's blue.
It was really cool.
That's cool.
So I definitely enjoyed the lighting, and the action was just awesome. Totally new ideas on how to portray like war. You know, you're freaking driving a car and having a war. So I just thought it was really cool. So yeah, it's definitely a different movie, but once I kind of was able to get past that, I felt like I definitely started enjoying it more, because the first like 40 minutes I was like, what is going on? I am so confused. But as far as like my rating, I think I would need to watch this movie again, especially after we talk about this podcast, because I feel like I'm going to understand a lot more things and be able to enjoy what the producers put into this movie, because I feel right now a lot of stuff went right over my head, and I feel like I need to kind of talk about it to be able to get like the full effect, but I'm out of time. So
Nice. Good 2 cents.
Yeah. It's really interesting. Like I said, I could talk about this movie forever, and I, in a funny way, self-flaw analysis. Whenever someone, I mean, I could talk anybody's ear off about movies. It's a horrible flaw of mine.
I think almost every podcast you've mentioned, I can talk about this all day.
Well, like
Every single time.
Even like outside of podcasts, like I go to hang out with my friends. I'm like, "Do you guys like movies?" And then I just like talk about them forever. It's horrible. It's so bad. I need to change it.
Movie box, like Pandora's box, just
Yeah,
coming out.
like I just unload, and it's horrible. I dominate conversations. It's not good. It's not a positive thing.
that's why I have a podcast.
It allows me to get this out and not have to worry about it later. But anyway, I've never had a chance to talk to anybody about this movie because no one's ever seen it. And I'd always want to bring it up to people because there's so many thoughts I have about it. And so I was kind of just left to my own devices, left to having conversations with myself. So it just kind of led me to study this movie even more. And it's really interesting, like remembering with talking to you guys, like remembering watching it for the first time, being like, what is going on? I have no idea. You know, it wasn't until the third time around that I finally figured it out a little bit. And then I started studying up because I haven't seen any of the other movies. It was just in my film class, and when I was in college, we weren't allowed to watch rated R movies. But the last day of the semester, our professor, he's like, I'm not supposed to tell you this. This is off the script. If I could recommend any rated R movies for you guys, here's a list of them, and here's why. Go watch them on your own time. And this was the number one on the list, and I'd always wanted to see this movie. I remember when it came out in theaters, and I saw the trailers. I was pumped. Anyway, I'm dragging on here. It's just kind of interesting to hear what you guys have to say about it. And I'm also really excited to like finally have somebody to talk to it about and like hear what they think about my opinions, because I know I'm not right about anything, and I know my ideas aren't the only ideas about this movie. So it'll be really interesting to see what you guys think about it and kind of hear your responses. So super quick. Ignore the noise. I'm going to move this so I can actually see Kate's face. Okay.
All right. Well, I'll just go ahead, and I got some stuff to talk about with this movie.
Okay. So do we want to super quick? I mean, just kind of talking about Easter eggs and things you notice, that type of stuff, or kind of talking about? This is a hard movie to like
Yeah, it's
mention Easter eggs because like everything about it and kind of the fun stuff is the movie. Like there's not really a separation between like
kind of clean gems.
yeah, like everything that's fun is a part of the story, which kind of makes this movie amazing, but also is that much harder to understand. So maybe we just kind of regularly, for new viewers, what we do here is we have a segment where we break down any Easter eggs or just fun stuff we notice about the movie, not necessarily about anything. It's just fun, it's enjoyable, and then we kind of fall in, is what we call it, and talk about the themes and the meaning of this movie. So I think we're kind of just going to have to compile those together and just... Yeah, okay, take it away.
All right, well, I'm just gonna go out with it. I want to say that we watched the movie, and then once we ended it, my first thought was, I feel like someone at a surface value could compare this to a movie. I think it's called Waterworld. It's kind of like a post-apocalyptic sort of feel, the same way this is, but it's more about like the whole world is completely flooded with water, and everybody's just being savages and trying to get after all of like the necessary resources to survive. But this way it was portrayed differently, because going into it, you kind of get thrown into the movie trying to understand what the heck's going on, because there's these three groups of people: one who owns water, one who owns gas, one who owns bullets. And so I just really had zero expectations coming to the movie, and I was extremely impressed by like how much they tried to, how do I put it, just make a huge deal about the cars. Like it was just a huge deal about it.
It's almost like religious.
Yeah,
they
like
chant V8 all the
worship
time.
their cars.
They call the doctor the organic mechanic.
Yeah, that was like, what the heck? I had a lot of what the heck moments, but it was always this amount of like out of fun rather than like I'm super confused, because there's just like a lot to talk about.
One thing, I gotta stop eating over here. One thing that I think is really interesting, especially watching it this time, is how like out of order George Miller explains the lore of this movie. That like the story of the movie is very linear. Max is captured, then Furiosa takes a war rig and tries to run away. So Max is put on a car and he's chased down by Immortan Joe. He gets his two brothers in on it. They make it to the many wives, and then they turn around and go back and get the Citadel. Like, it's a pretty straightforward linear story. But especially coming from last week, we forgot to mention we watched Inception. Christopher Nolan, he always tells things kind of out of line. You know, things are told that happened previously are told later. You know, like time is kind of weird in the way he tells a story, and the story's not very linear. But this story is linear, but your understanding of what's happening in the world and like the world building or the lore of it is very non-linear. Like I said, it took me like 3 times to figure out this movie, because I noticed in the first time that for whatever reason, Max has to be hooked up to, he's called a blood bag, and he's hooked up to an IV type thing. And I was like, okay, that's weird. And then the second time watching it, I was like, okay, he's hooked up to this for a reason. And so later in the movie, when Nux mentions how he's sick and they mention a healthy baby, I was like, oh, okay, maybe they're unhealthy, so they need blood. And so it's kind of like details that maybe you can remember from your first viewing. You go back, and later in the story, you're like, oh, way back at the beginning of the movie, they explain why, which I think is really interesting. I wonder why he did it that way. Because like a lot of like stories or strange worlds that you go in, you kind of enter this world, so to speak, and it's like, okay, here's the lore of this world, here's how things work, here's the laws that the world lives by, you know? Like, I don't know, I think it's interesting. Every time I watch, I'm like, oh, that's a little more about the world of Mad Max that I didn't know.
I just had a thought, is that I think he had the movie in my head. I watched the movie and I want to watch it again after I finished it, because it was a good enough movie by itself without me having to understand the story all too well to have me go back and watch it again. I think that's maybe why he wanted the director wanted to give that vibe off so that people would come back again and again, and then realize how good of a movie is. Like you said, like you mentioned before, you've watched it quite a few times, and now you enjoy it and understand it, and now you have an appreciation for it. While before, like for me, I remember just a few things from the movie, like the incredible action, the craziness of the story, and how amazing Tom Hardy is, even though he has like, I don't know, a page and a half of lines. And so all those good things, these small highlights makes you want to go watch the movie again. And so I feel like that's a pretty unique strategy, because a lot of movies that you watch it and you leave kind of with a glass half full or half empty, you're kind of left without questions, and you kind of have this bitter taste in your mouth. But with this movie, I feel that, okay, I think I need to watch this again because I want to, rather than like, that kind of sucked. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I think that's what I was thinking.
Maybe his tactic is to inspire people to rewatch it.
Yeah. I would agree.
Yeah, I mean, when I was watching this, I kind of got that vibe that if you enjoy Transformers, you're really going to like this movie too. Like, straight up.
That's a good answer, yeah.
And, you know, it's definitely like, it's different coming off of a movie like we watched last week for the podcast, Inception.
Different step.
Because Inception, there's so much into like the story that you don't catch all of it the first time you watch it. And I feel like this one's kind of like that, but more in like a way that it's more like a cinematic effect on things you got to catch. And definitely there's like a story, but like underlying everything. But it's a different kind of vibe to like understand, if that makes sense. But like I said, like I mentioned in my 2 cents, one thing I really enjoyed was just the lighting in the film. It kind of set 2 different moods. Like every time they're, you know, it's out in the sun, like daylight in the desert.
Just teal and orange everywhere.
Yeah.
It's just hard
you
colors.
just think of action. You know, these guys are going at war. They're just fighting on their cars and their trucks. There's a guitar dude just going ham.
Yeah, that was crazy. I was like, his only job is just to play. He survives.
Flamethrower coming out of his guitar.
Because there's a fight scene where it's like crap is going down with this guitar player, and he's just surviving, and like, but he's on a bunch.
And then as soon as the fight leaves, he's like, all right, I got my guitar back. And he keeps playing.
And, you know, this daylight mood kind of sets this effect of just chaos, you know?
Yeah.
And everything, you know, it's like definitely... Hot. Yeah, you get that feel. Watching it, you're just like, wow, it's so hot.
I don't want to be there.
Yeah, you see him driving in the storm, and like you kind of like, I don't know. When they drove into the storm, I kind of like squinted my eyes, so like I wouldn't get dust in my eyes, you know? Just because, which just goes into like the fact of how well like the lighting and like the setting really is. Because anytime they went like at night, I just love that blue color. That lighting was so cool. Because it kind of took me a second to realize, hey, it's night, you know? But,
yeah, that's true.
You know, it was definitely a lot more, like, chill, I guess, in that kind of lighting. And it kind of gave you time to develop with the characters, because that's when a lot of the development went down.
Yeah.
Or the character arcs kind of made progress. Because when there's just, like, explosions and, like, driving everywhere, it's kind of hard to get into that, like, feely stuff.
Yeah.
But I just really enjoyed that part. So.
Yeah, I will say, piggybacking off of that is like, I heard one complaint from somebody, and then I went and rewatched the movie to prove them wrong, because this movie's flawless to me. Yeah. And they were saying that like, oh, it's a movie that like it keeps you entertained with the action, and then it slows down to tell you the story and get to know the characters, and then when that gets a little boring, there's another action scene. And I feel like that's true in some movies, but I rewatched this one, and it's like, none of those scenes are ever boring. That like the action has enough story to keep me learning and keep me wondering about what's happening next. And it's also a ton of action. And then those story moments, as you want to call them, still have enough action and enough conflict that it's suspenseful, and I worry about the safety of the characters while learning about them, which I think is incredible. That like it's able to slow it down and speed it up while also kind of just maintaining the same tempo.
Yeah, I think I'm along with you there, because watching this movie, no matter what the tempo was, I legit had no idea what was going to happen. Like, this movie was really good at that. Like, it hooks you, and you're just like, it's nighttime, and Max just like, especially that part, you know, they get past the bog, and they're kind of driving on that high road, and Max just like walks off. You're like, what the heck is going? Like, what is happening, dude? Like, he's just gone, and then you just hear like an explosion. Like, what? So it definitely kept me. I didn't get that vibe of it slowing down necessarily, in the fact that I had no idea what was happening. Like, not like that, but like I had no idea what was going to happen.
Yeah.
So it kept me hooked, as in trying to figure out what was happening, who the heck is who, and why are they doing this.
Yeah. And one thing I did notice, so compared to other movies, whenever they would slow things down, it's like a kind of a mediocre movie. When they try to slow things down in order to explain the storyline, it's like really choppy and like really ugly dialogue. It doesn't make any sense at all. But with this one, I don't feel like it kind of was like crazy hectic, just everything. Okay, now story, but it just kind of feel like, all right, it's just kind of like, I don't know, with the color scheme and the light scheme, the blue color, I feel like it kind of made things just slightly slower to me, so that it's not like it's just dull and then super, super hard action, then dull again. But it just helped to keep the story interesting.
Yeah, something that Kate just helped me understand with like the blue color is like, it's almost like George Miller changed the way the movie looks, that it's just like, it's black and blue. It's just blue and darker shades of blue. So it's almost easier for like your eyes to take in. Yes. So you're not thinking about it so much with your eyes, and you're thinking about it more with your mind. That's a cheesy way to say that, but I don't know. It's really, I like, one of the ways I love to describe this movie is it's just intelligent filmmaking. Like, everything that you could possibly know about how to direct and shoot a movie, I feel like George Miller knows in making this movie. He knows about writing. He knows about character development. He knows about dialogue and a need for less dialogue. He knows about like the way it should look, the way it should sound, the way that it should progress, in addition to incredible cinematography and incredible practical effects. Like, you could just enjoy this movie as like a homage to good old practical effects. Yes. Which is incredible. I read somewhere, I think it was an interview that George Miller had somewhere, and he was saying that like, for a lot of the action scenes, they'd have to get so close to the action, they didn't want to risk these huge, expensive Hollywood cameras. And, you know, kind of those quick cuts, like close to the action, just explosion, and then moves to some like wider angle. They would use like a Canon 5D, you know, just a regular DSLR, you know, that like a photographer has, and they'd shoot video of it. And I think they blew up like 5 of them. If I remember right. Like, one of them was from like the heat, like it was just so hot in the Australian desert that it just blew up. The rest was like so involved in the action that, if I remember right, I gotta go find that article.
I want to see that, like that film, that recording of it's like recording and it's just gone. It's like, what the heck?
Yeah. So I don't know. It's an interesting movie.
Yeah. Before I forget, something I noticed this movie did really well on was it told the story in just like visuals. It was really good at things they wanted you to notice. They did really good at. Like, they'd zoom in on a certain like object, or they kind of like wide view it and you'd see something in the peripherals or the colors that pop out at you. Is it told you things about the story that was never even said. Like, I remember certain scenes where they zoom up on skulls on the truck, and you kind of just get the vibe of like who these people are and like just what goes down on the Fury Road, because it mentions that earlier with Knox or whatever, that, you know, I'm gonna die on the Fury Road, and you're like, what the heck is the Fury Road? Like, you're not introduced to that at all, pretty much. But you just get this vibe. It's not necessarily like a certain place or anything. It's just the whole environment and setting of being at war out in the desert, driving your freaking truck with explosions and flamethrowers. Like, it's just, I just thought it was really good with the cinematography on drawing your attention to certain things that they wanted to be noticed.
Yeah. And there's also, to that, it's like, I noticed this time particularly that like things that you really need to notice are like center frame, so your eyes aren't like shooting around the screen like, what am I supposed to focus on next? It was kind of like those things were always just like dead center. It was easy for your eyes to find. So in like that way, George Miller was knowledgeable. Like, okay, this particular thing, I really wanted to be clear what I'm conveying. Okay, I'm going to zoom in on it, and I'm going to put it in the center. You can't miss it. So I'm curious, unless you guys have anything else to say super quick. Maybe you guys totally get the story now. Probably smarter than me. It took me 3 watches to figure it out. And I kind of want to just like in-depth explain my personal understanding of the story and see if you guys agree with me.
Yeah, I want to hear that.
Okay, so, and I will say, for any movie buff, any Mad Max buff, I have not seen the other movies. I'm not even going to try and reference those or try to understand them. Honestly, I don't even know what happens in them. I just know, all I know is that he was a cop, he was a father and a husband, and he was a good man. And then he lost his wife and his daughter. And it, in this movie, affects him, he's kind of insane because of that. But he's still a good man, to the point where he has a hard time letting injustice go untouched. But anyway, so I'm struggling to find out where to start. Okay. Because I don't just want to like read through the movie like a textbook. So maybe like trying to find a good footing. Like maybe like what are questions you guys have about it, or what are things you're wondering, or things that didn't make sense?
Maybe kind of go into the whole religion thing a little.
Okay.
Yeah, they were like super religious. Like it was a lot of, that just drove everybody's motive to like just keep doing what they're doing. So what? How about more about that?
Yeah, again, like incredible filmmaking. George Miller needed a reason to have these war boys going to 11 in every scene to die. Like, and yeah, and like you could just have like a mediocre movie where you just have these faceless goons who are just going to 11 to kill the good guys, or you could have these faceless and faced goons who are going to 11 in every scene because it means the world to them.
This is probably just ignorance here, but what do you mean by like going to 11?
Like they're jumping off trucks into spikes with explosions. Like they're just like, like the phrase going to 11 is like on like a speaker for like a rock, like plug your guitar into or whatever. Normally the volume dial goes up to 10. It's like, oh, we're going to take it up to 11. So like everything they do is like absolute loyalty to die. Yeah. And I also think that like part of it and why I think it has meaning. Oh, I'm going to get so deep into this. I want to keep it simple, super quick. Okay, let me dial back. Immortan Joe is a guy who controls water. And he has these wives, breeders as he calls them, which is horrible. Yeah, horrible. That he has children with. And I still don't understand if all of the war boys are his children, but a lot of them are, like Rictus, the huge dude with him, and some other kids. I assume, because he also had the other mothers who were pouring out milk. I don't know how to say that.
Yeah, it was weird.
But anyway, so he's been doing this for a while. So I think that a lot of the war boys are his children, and because he's sick, they're also sick. They're dying. And so, one, they already know they're going to die, so that gives them a reason to die in glory.
Like nothing to lose.
Yeah, they almost have nothing to lose. So it's like, well, if I'm going to die anyway, may as well do it so I can go to Valhalla. Yeah, so I can be shiny in chrome. So, which is interesting. So kind of just the synopsis of the story is that the post-apocalyptic, the world's horrible, and so these boys need blood, and that's how Max gets involved. He's a universal donor, and Nux is in need of blood, so they hook him up to Max. And that's how he gets involved. And Furiosa, who was captured by Immortan Joe, her and her mom, she wants to redeem herself by redeeming and freeing these breeders, as he calls them, and taking them to a place full of hope, to the green place, a place where they can be free of such horrible things. And slavery and yeah, it's just really interesting to see. So I guess to get into the religion thing a little bit more is that these war boys have been, to their defense, faithfully following an unrighteous leader. Like, to their knowledge, Immortan Joe is their savior, right? He's the one that gives them water. He's the one that gives them food. He gives them life. And in this crazy world that I can't even begin to understand, where everything has gone nuts to the point where you're dying constantly, they're trying to do what they believe is right. that they're striving for immortality, a life. Like Nux kept saying, "I live, I die, I live again." That they're almost like striving for something beyond mortality.
Just like a full life, because you could start the movie. They kept saying a half lives.
Yeah, which I was trying to find a good definition of immortality, and I found this one online that I loved, and it's simply just a life that survives beyond mortality. I think that so to that point and I think it's interesting, in our relationship to religion, and just critical thinking about that, and what mortality we're striving for and what we're willing to do. It's just interesting, I not that part so much. I don't really think is something that I personally consider and think about a lot. I just think it's really cool filmmaking and cool lore in the movie that these war boys are just so devoted because of like their religious belief in what Immortan Joe tells them, that they'll go to Valhalla, and then they're all mediocre, I guess. None of them do.
Well, that shows like the flaw in what's his name again? Immortan Joe is that like he created this religion per se, that if you die for me, I will take you to Valhalla or heaven per se. Is that they are so dedicated to it, and that they try to just lay down their lives for him, and every single time he's not satisfied because he's just not getting what he wants. Yeah. And so that kind of that explains in Immortan Joe that he's not just this. He's not this guy who's actually devoted to like this religion. No, he made this up so that people would follow him, and he's actually just all in it for himself. Because there's 3 brothers in the movie, and it seems like he's kind of the head honcho of the 3, and then the other 2 are kind of complaining, like, okay, you're just so obsessed with what you want and everything that you have and all this stuff. They kind of just go along with it, and at the very end where his brothers are dying off, he really doesn't care, and he wants what he wants so badly, which his motive, I was trying to figure out I want to ask you, like, what do you think his motive was? Like, his true motive of why he was doing all this stuff, went to such great lengths to get back to his quote-unquote wives.
I think it's just kind of his weird obsession with them, that he was willing to leave his own home completely unabandoned. That's... Unabandoned. Wow. Leave it abandoned. Unabandoned. Yeah, exactly. Disregardless. This is horrible. Anyway, so I think it's just a crazy obsession with his control over these poor women, to the point, and I mean, even his one Splendid that he calls, I realized this time she has a different name. I don't remember what it is, like Dada or something like that. That's way off, but I know it starts with an A and has a bunch of D's in it. But he calls her Splendid. Like, he has this disgusting infatuation with her, to the point where he like he's so bloodthirsty towards Furiosa, but the second that Splendid like opens the door and leans in front of Furiosa, he like won't take the shot because he's so infatuated with this slave of his. It's disgusting what it is, really. And so his weird obsession for them causes him to just want to get them back.
Yeah, I think this goes into... I read a book a long time ago. I don't remember what it was called or who wrote it or whatever. I just remember this one theme that was going about saying that, like, power just corrupts. That's all it does. Like, power is not good at all. And I think if you're in agreement with that statement, this movie kind of shows it. Because you got these 3 brothers, and they have power, and what do they do with it? They use it for only personal gain. Like, each of them...
Everything they do is evil.
Yeah.
They're all disgusting, too.
Yeah, it's awful. Each of these dudes just they each have these weird, like, issues or whatever, but, like... Yeah,
the gas... Yeah, the gasoline dude, whatever. Like, his legs have, like, warts on warts, and that was what I thought it was. It was just, like, gross. Super lazy. But I had a thought that maybe one of his motives was not only like his crazy infatuation that he's just like evil about all this stuff, but also that he is extremely confident that he is the all-powerful. No one will ever cross him. So that Furiosa actually trying to escape just infuriates him so much. And then when he leaves, and then when he realizes that they try to go back to, what's it called?
The Citadel.
Citadel, knowing that it's unguarded. I kind of, when he realized it, you can just see that, oh my gosh, I might lose like everything. And so he just kind of gets super just desperate and just pretty much a savage. So I feel like it's more of what I'm trying to get to is that he's just like he has so much confidence that he's just blind toward any sort of like, no one can never touch me because I'm the Immortan Joe.
Yeah. I think even his name, which is interesting. I also find it really, what is the word I'm searching for? Contradicting. How all the wives constantly say they wrote it in their room. I don't know if you want to call it a room, but who killed the world. They say it to Nux. They say it throughout the movie, and I always was like, what does that even mean? Like, who did the what? And then Immortan Joe constantly says like he's the savior. He's there to save everybody. I think it's a powerful. So many articles about this movie have been written about the powerful messages about like feminism and like the male. Oh, what's the word I'm searching for? The male is the only word coming to mind. Hierarchy, but that's not the right word. The male dominance, just kind of in the world. One of the it's just really, really interesting to see like they understand that like it was his pride, his selfishness, his belief that he was the greatest thing since sliced bread that killed the world.
I just realized that. First off, if you guys remember watching the movie 10,000 BC,
Yeah.
Vaguely.
so there's a point where they show up to this like new like this land. The main character is the protagonist, and they approach and they realize they find this guy who claims that he is a god and that everybody worships him. But then the main protagonist kills this sort of quote unquote god, and then he says, "Look, he is immortal. He's no longer like I just proved him wrong." And then everybody kind of just like goes crazy and like they're free people. And then in coming back here to Mad Max, when they showed Immortan Joe, this guy is dead. Everybody's like, he's dead. He is not the Redeemer. He's not our guy. He's just some dude who's selfish. And then everybody's just free for themselves. Like we are our own person. So I just realized that there's such a small comparison there too. I don't know. Would you agree with that?
No, yeah, definitely. So just kind of moving away from the craziness of Immortan Joe, because I profess myself as an expert on this, and I'm struggling to explain my thoughts about it because I have so many that like I don't know where to start. So let's start with something that I'm confident I can explain better. A profound theme and message I think this movie has, and Furiosa mentions it, Mad Max mentions it too, Furiosa, is the theme of redemption. I don't know, what are your before I say anything, I want to hear your guys' thoughts about it.
When you say redemption, do you mean like hope?
Kind of the both of them combined. Hope was for the wives, a hope of saving themselves, redeeming themselves from this slavery, so to speak. So I guess you could say in that way. And I think Furiosa's hope was to redeem herself of not being able to, protect herself, protect women. I don't know. It's hard for me to understand Furiosa's desire for redemption, or like Max's desire, his inability to save his family. And in some way he wants to redeem himself from those actions. Or Nux, for example, to redeem himself from his blind loyalty to Immortan Joe. There's a lot of themes that I have in there. Yeah. But anyway, I went too far.
Well, I think that was one thing I picked up on watching the movie was Max and like right from the get-go. In the first couple seconds of the movie, you get this effect of where he's like standing out over the desert and he hears like the voice of his daughter, like his wife. So from the get-go, you kind of get this feel of like something that kind of haunts him, and then it kind of drives him to make certain decisions later on. And how like he says, like, I remember he says to Furiosa, like, there is no hope or something like that. I don't remember the exact line, but
hope is a mistake.
Yeah, if you don't get what you're hoping for, you'll go insane.
Yeah. And so basically, like, I think that's what drove him to kind of reach out to them and to save the group of women and say, hey, let's go back to the Citadel because, like, there is hope there. And he kind of realized he could save them. So I think it kind of, the theme I was just trying to, or at least I picked up on from him was, like, in the end, like, we all have that hope. Like, it's just our choice whether to, like, accept it or not, because hope can be, like, one of the biggest, like, motivators ever. Even if you have, like, a tiny bit of hope, you're going to do, like, everything you can to, like, reach that goal or whatever. And so I feel like Max is getting haunted by the idea that he can't save the people he wants to save. And so that's he tells you that, like, he is hunted by all, like, in the beginning. He's just alone, like an outcast. He refuses to, like, create any type of bond with anyone because he, I think, deep down feels like he can't save anyone. So when he finally accepts that, like, he cares about, like, some people and he wants to help them, he's, like, accepting that hope of the idea of, like, yeah, you can have, like, a good relationship with someone and still have that hope, and that's okay. Like, it's human to do that, and, like, you don't have to be an outcast.
Yeah. I also think it's really interesting, like, the what's the word I'm searching for? Let's just talk about that quote at the end of the movie. You know what I'm talking about? Like, right after it ends, like Furiosa. Yeah, so Furiosa is raising up into the Citadel, and Max gets off, and he just walks through the crowd and shares just a simple nod with her and wanders off. And then the quote shows up, where must we go, we who wander this wasteland in search of our better selves? The first history man. It's something that George Miller made up for the movie, but I don't know. Can you repeat it again? Yeah. So, where must we go, we who wander this wasteland in search of our better selves?
My first thought is we always want to be better than who we are right now. Like, we're always looking forward. Like, I want to be better. I want to get rid of this old habit. I want to, so on and so forth. Is Mad Max had this, like, this grudge or this, like, regret that he's been carrying with him forever, that he couldn't save his family. And then he sees these group of people who are trying to find hope, trying to find happiness. And he says, I can make a difference. And he helps, and he helps save them. And then once he does that, he's like, I feel like I am a better person because of what I have just done. And so he feels satisfied with that. And so he kind of just blends into the crowd to where I am, like, I don't know, I can't find anything else.
Maybe just like he can be a part of the crowd now. I don't know. That's what makes part of the crowd. That's what makes me think.
Stuff he can go and do. I can go and just live my own life. I don't have to go and
run away from everyone,
or try to avenge or redeem my family. But it's just that I am a better person. Therefore, I am happy. I'm fine with myself. And I can now just depart and just.
Yeah, I think it's interesting that, like, Mad Max necessarily isn't like a superhero, where his yeah, it's not like his job to save everybody in the world. Like, I'm sure because of the goodness in him, he would, but that's not who he is. That's not what he's striving to do. It's left to
anti-hero.
Not even that. Like, yeah, at the beginning, he talks about how the only instinct left is to survive. And that's anything else besides surviving is secondary. And you can kind of see that instinct in Max. When he takes a map, he gathers more ammo. He gets another boot. He keeps the blood tube, Anyway, so back to the quote. And something that I should have said in my 2 cents, but I didn't, that I love about this movie, particularly when it approaches, like, themes and what I like to call social commentary, is that it asks more questions than it gives answers, which I think is profound. That I think it's really, really life-changing, for lack of better words, to walk away from a conversation or a movie about difficult subjects or very personal and introspective subjects, and to walk away with a question. I think that's always more powerful than to walk away with an answer. And I could be wrong. Maybe that's up for personal interpretation. But what I love about this movie is that it asks kind of, are we wandering? Are we in a wasteland? Are we, what is our better selves that we're in search of? Where do we need to go? I don't know, and I don't have the answers to these questions. I really like this movie because every time I watch it, it makes me think. Because again, in that wasteland that they're in the desert, they have one job: survive. Anything else is secondary. In our world, there's so much more. There's so many small wastelands. Yeah, there's so many more complexities that make this wasteland that much more wasteful, for lack of better words. Makes it more difficult in wandering through in search of our better selves.
Like if you think about it, like living, like think about like your own life. Is there ever a point where I just need to survive? Other than like having a bad day, is there ever a point where you're like, okay, I need to survive. I need to just try to be alive by the end of the day. Like I don't really feel like I'm thinking about today, for example. I've never had that thought today of like I need to survive. But the director is asking, are we living in a wasteland right now? And it's not literally saying a physical geographical place, but a place where like you are going nowhere, you're not making any progress, and your happiness feels dull, and you feel like you need to be a better person, but you're not doing anything about it. And my thought was, to answer that question, I feel like I always need to push myself. And throughout the whole movie, it gave me a feeling of this is just dragging out. Like they've done so much and they're so tired. Unless they're exhausted. Like I don't ever see them in the movie ever like actually eating actual food. Like you never actually see that. Yeah. Like they'll mention it a couple of times, or like them drinking water. That's a couple of scenes where it actually shows that, but it's the point where I'm sure they're just exhausted. And then there's actually one scene I remember where it just cuts to them actually sleeping, actually asleep, just trying to recover, and that all those necessities, that's all they're thinking about. But here in our life right now, we hardly ever think about that. There's a water bottle in my hand. There's food right over here right here in the pantry. But that like the director was trying to show that being a better person is a reachable goal, not this abstract thought. Yeah. Does that make sense? Yeah.
I think it's really, really interesting to think about and analyze. Again, I don't have the answers to it. I think it's something we all have to answer. One answer I will say that I feel that this movie gives kind of to the question, in search of our better selves, in search of that better person, where do we go? What has to be done type of thing? Like where's that redemption? How do you achieve said redemption to be a better person? I think one that this movie really emphasizes, especially this time I caught on to it, is the fight against injustice, no matter what it will be. In this movie, I feel like Max honestly had a ton of agency. I think a lot of times in movies, main characters, protagonists are just kind of like thrown into the story, and no matter what they do about it, they're just involved in this conflict. And multiple times Max was given a way out, and he goes back. Mm-hmm. There's even one point he's like, "Oh, I'll find my own way," and he can't rest, so to speak. So he goes and gets him and gives him hope again when they were completely out of it. And I think it kind of asks the question in search of our better selves. It answers that question with another question. Well, how far are you willing to go to fight injustice in the world? Whether it's slavery to breeders, as somebody calls them in this movie, women, whatever it is. I think it's something I still don't have my head totally wrapped around, but every time I watch it, the movie makes me consider kind of my own moral standings and my defense of what is right and wrong, and my defense and striving to reach that better person, and what I'm willing to do and where I'm going. If I'm even searching. Sometimes it makes me wonder that.
Yeah, I mean, my take on that quote is I want to ask you guys a question. When you hear the word wasteland, like what's one of the first words that like pops into your head? Just wasteland.
And my first word is dull.
Desert,
a wasteland, right? And I think part of that, what that quote is kind of reaching for, is that there's going to be wastelands that we all have to go through to be like a better person. Like, to be a better person, we have to go through some pretty hard stuff. Like, it's going to be difficult. It's going to be things you may not want to do, or maybe things you even dread doing. But, you know, I'm sure in the movie, when they made the choice, Max convinces them all to go back to the Citadel. Like, they even recognize, heck, we might even die. But, you know, there actually is hope. We're not just going to go off for 160 days in one direction, just thinking that there's going to be something out there. But they have an actual destination in mind. Actual hope placed towards something that will actually, like, pay off for them. And then, like, they choose, hey, yeah, we're probably going to die, and it's going to be really tough, but we're going to do it. And in the end, yeah, you know, things go down. They lose some of their close friends, but they reach their goal. And, like, they went through, like, trials and stuff like that, too. So I think that quote, to me, my take on it, is that we all have to pass through, like, certain wastelands. And, yeah, it may be dull. It may be, like, a desert or, you know, whatever comes to your mind when you think of wasteland. But that to be a better person requires, like, some kind of sacrifice or, like, push to maybe do things you don't want to do. And I think in the end, like, at the end of the day, you just got to ask yourself, like, have I tried becoming a better person today? Maybe facing those demons that are inside yourself, or maybe just out there in the world that necessarily you're afraid of or don't want to, like, face. But I think in the end, like, if you truly want to become a better person, you got to face it at some point. And whether you want to do it alone or with people, I think that's your choice. But that's kind of my take on that quote.
I just had a thought. Do you guys remember one of the girls? She died because of this throughout the whole battle. One of them died, and then another one was just saying, "Why did we leave such a quote unquote high life?" They were saying, like, she treated us, he took care of us, even though he kind of drug us through the mud. Was kind of crazy, but we were able to live, and, like, we had resources, we had all this stuff, and she actually wanted to go back. Kind of like, this is kind of a weird tie-in, but, like, when they, in the Bible, when the Israelites they left Egypt, and then they wanted to go back because it was so hard. They wanted to go back and do their easy life. So going off of what Kelton said is that, like, sometimes it's hard. We want to go back and just, well, you know, being miserable and not really progressing anywhere or going anywhere, it wasn't that bad. Like, you're trying to convince yourself, like, this uncomfortable spot right now was not worth it. I want to go back to being miserable again because I found a level of happiness. But you gotta push through the wasteland in order to see that there is a place where you can be happier than where you are right now.
Yeah, it's interesting to have conversations about this movie now that people have seen it. Because, I mean, you can have, like, very superficial conversations about how cool it looks. Then you can have deep conversations about questions that makes you ask yourself. So just kind of to wrap it up here, my last thought. I think that in search of that better person, that truly is redemption, reaching that better person, so to speak, if it ever can be reached. But I think that really is, in a way, is its own immortality. I love that the quote is written by the first history man, because at any given point in time, there's a first history man, someone who writes the first history after the world starts over. And I like to think that it's somebody writing the history of Mad Max, and prompting us to think, where do we go in search of this, our better selves, telling a story about someone who did so much to better the world. And I think in that way we can reach an immortality, meaning a life that lives beyond our mortal life, you know, is reaching that redemption in our better selves. So
yeah, and kind of wrap up my thoughts here is, like, overall, this is a movie. It's a good movie. Like, you got to have different expectations. It's not going to be like your standard just, like, action movie, but go in, you know, just with an open mind, and, like, just look for things that you enjoy, and if you do that, you'll enjoy the movie. Yeah. And also, like, before we forget, like, you guys should follow us on, like, our social media accounts too. Yeah,
definitely. Tweet at us. Tell us what we could do better. Tell us what things you want us to talk about in movies. Tell us what you like about the movies. But tweet at us. It's at Binge Basement. That's our Twitter. So definitely follow us on there. Tweet at us. And subscribe on any places you can subscribe to podcasts. And next week, definitely come back because we're starting something pretty big. It's going to be way different than this movie, that's for sure.
Yeah, it's going to take a while.
It's going to take... So what we're doing, real quick, we'll key in, exclusive first look, is we are starting our journey with Iron Man and going all the way through the Infinity Saga. So Iron Man all the way to Spider-Man Far From Home. And that is going to take a long time, 1 week at a time. But we're going to break it up into the phases, and after each phase, we're going to take a break with a few other movies and then jump back into Marvel. So if you love podcasts, you love movies, and especially if you love Iron Man and Marvel, subscribe because we're going to be watching each movie and talking about it. So,
and again, our Twitter account is at Binge Basement, the Basement Binge. Follow us on Twitter to see sneak peeks and updates about our podcast and where you can listen and re-listen to episodes that we've done before and keep up to date. Thanks for listening.
We're also looking to have like an Instagram account too soon, so we'll keep you updated on that.
Instagram account. Stay tuned for that.
Yeah. So, thanks for listening.
Have a good week. Goodbye.
Ciao, ciao.